Hi and welcome to the NBA show. My name is Morten Jensen and today we'll be doing something new. This is Monday, so we are starting something called the Monday News Dump. And this is the first episode of that new endeavor, so stay tuned. First on the item list is Alize Johnson, who signed a 3-year, $4 million contract with the Brooklyn Nets. And you might be thinking, is that really newsworthy? And yes, it is. Johnson had signed two 10-day contracts, which then got extended to a contract that lasts for the remainder of this season, following 2 years additionally put on that contract, both of which are non-guaranteed. The reason it's worth bringing up this acquisition is that Johnson has been outstanding for the Brooklyn Nets after his two initial 10-day contracts. He's averaging 7.8 points per game, 5.8 rebounds, shooting almost 66% from the field, and he's hitting over 78% from within 3 feet of the basket. He's one of those old school bully ball type of players who scores near the rim, not much of a 3-point shooter, but he's tough. He can give you that inside presence. He can rebound. There's a lot to like there. He might only be 6'7", about 225. That doesn't really matter. He's a guy who rebounds outside of his area. Historically, he's been phenomenal on the glass as well, and the Nets could really use a presence like this moving forward. What's really interesting here is how Johnson is a testament to why 10-day contracts work. Here's a guy who really wasn't held in high regard around the league. The Nets decided, you know what, let's bring you in on a 10-day. He played his ass off during the first one. They went, you know what, let's give you another one. Let's see if we can keep this train rolling. He did, and now they are rewarding him with a remainder of the season contract, which is going to pay out roughly $400,000, and then he's on what you call a regular contract over the next 2 years, although, as I mentioned, it is non-guaranteed. So the Nets have a lot of flexibility here. They're only on the hook for this season. They can cut bait whenever they want to. If at the end of this season they decide, you know what, we're not really in on the Alize Johnson experience, they can cut ties with him, and they can do so this year. They can keep him for the next season and then cut ties with them afterwards. They just have so much flexibility going on here. And for Johnson, that might not be optimal, but he is in a situation where he does have to work for it and keep proving himself. I have to imagine, though, that if he continues this path of being this efficient, this strong around the basket, the Nets are actually going to say, you know what, let's fully guarantee that, which they can do at any given point. They can fully guarantee the remainder of the contract if they so choose. So there is just a lot of potential here for a partnership that we could see grow in time. I think Johnson is one of those very, very intriguing building blocks that you can put next to a Kevin Durant, next to a Kyrie Irving, next to a James Harden, and next to a Joe Harris, who does count as a core piece. I think for him, having this role, someone who can just come in off the bench, play hard, rebound, score near the rim, that is an outstanding luxury to have, and it wouldn't even shock me if a year from now he is one of the primary bigs in Brooklyn. Look, I know that's big praise coming from someone who has just concluded 2 10-days, but he looks like this is the team for him, and sometimes fit just matters. So it's going to be super interesting to see what he's going to bring to the table for the rest of this year and beyond. Next up, some bad news. Unfortunately, Warriors rookie center James Wiseman has a meniscus injury in his knee. He is probably done for the year, according to ESPN's Adrian Wojnarowski, and that is just one of the most saddest conclusions to a up and down rookie season that we can get. Wiseman started out the year kind of hot, slowed down a bit, came back down to earth, and unfortunately just kept running into these confidence issues, which, by the way, is very normal. He's played most of the season at the age of 19. He just recently turned 20. It's completely understandable that the NBA could be overwhelming, especially when you take into account that Wiseman played only 3 games in college, didn't have a training camp. Like, he came into this thing practically untested. So for what he's done so far this year, which is averaging 11.5 points and 5.8 rebounds, that's decent enough. I mean, yes, would you like to see a little bit more based on his raw talent and size? obviously, but I will defend him. This is, again, a very, very young player who didn't really have a whole lot of time to get acclimated to his teammates, most of whom, by the way, are significantly older than him, so that also has to be a mental hurdle that he just has to get on with. There are a lot of moving parts here. It's ultimately very, very disappointing to see this on his behalf. It's so heartbreaking considering how he also just struggled here at the end of his year. He really couldn't get anything going. Over the past few games, he just looked like a walking disaster, which, again, that's not necessarily his fault. A lot of guys hit the rookie wall and they can't really get out of it. They stumble a little bit and it's going to take some time. What Wiseman really needs moving forward is a training camp and a summer league, probably in reverse order. So if he can get healthy enough at that point in time to actually compete in those, that would be great. Now, there is really no set timetable for his return, so that's just me guessing. I don't know when he's back, but it would behoove him, it would behoove the Golden State Warriors to see if he could be back by the time of Summer League, and then hopefully he can go from that right into training camp, and then hopefully again establish himself on the team as the center moving forward. Or maybe, as I talked about in a video last week, maybe it's time to move off of him to get someone more established in to help Curry. There are a lot of moving parts, like I said, but one thing we can all agree on is that this injury is just super disappointing for everyone involved. It's just heartbreaking to see a guy like this go down in this way. So thoughts are with Wiseman. Hopefully he gets better soon. That's just a huge blow for the Golden State Warriors as well. This could mean that they actually end up missing out on the playoffs, because even though Wiseman didn't really play up to par, he was still a big presence who clogged the lane and did provide them with something that they are now going to miss. Next up is the upcoming, hopefully, maybe, sale of the Minnesota Timberwolves and Minnesota Lynx. As we know, their current owner, Glenn Taylor, bought the team back in 1994 for $88 million. And yes, that's a lot of money, but compared to the price that he's going to be selling it for, which is $1.4 billion, I would say it was a pretty smart investment. So if you have a chance of finding a time machine and you can go back in the mid 90s or early 90s and buy an NBA team, I would suggest that you do so, because nowadays those teams are going for a minimum of $1.5 billion, it seems. So Glenn Taylor is going to be lining his pockets full, although he does have certain, let's say, concerns going into this entire sale. Now, Taylor wants to keep the team in Minnesota, but the guys buying the team, former baseball star Alex Rodriguez and billionaire Mark Lore, are potentially looking at moving the franchise to Seattle. Now, that is just going to open a can of worms, because as we know, when Clay Bennett back in the day moved the Seattle Supersonics to Oklahoma City and rebranded them the Thunder, he just practically stole away a franchise from Seattle. This led to a lot of debate and frustrations. Sonics fans are still upset and looking to get their team back in some capacity, whether it's the Thunder moving back or some other team. The first one's not going to happen, obviously, but they want a franchise in Seattle. They have a die-hard basketball mentality up there, so it stands to reason that if the Wolves were to move to Seattle, they would be highly welcomed. But of course, if you did that, you would just be doing practically the same thing that happened in 2008. What is going to happen to Minnesota basketball then? Are their fan base going to create documentaries as we saw in Seattle? Probably, and fairly so. So this is going to be one of those things that has to be handled very, very carefully, because you don't want to end up being one of those scorned fan bases who really disengage from the NBA because of it. That's not a good look for the NBA, it's not a good look for their brand. And even if Minnesota isn't the biggest market out there, it's still pretty central. There is a lot of basketball interest there, just as there is in Seattle, so it becomes one of those balancing acts. Looking at the big picture though, you have to also see the optimism here if you're a fan of the Wolves. The Wolves have missed the playoffs in 16 out of the last 17 seasons. They have just been one of the worst NBA franchises in that span. They've only gotten out of the first round once, which was back when Kevin Garnett won the MVP in 2004. That's a long time ago. They aren't really now projected to be big-time winners. Their current roster construction is weird and all kinds of messed up. It doesn't really appear that they're on the right track right now. So maybe a change of ownership and a complete overhaul in the front office, coaching staff, maybe even roster is what you need. And I know that Wolves fans are going to watch this and go, well, there's nowhere we're moving off of Karl-Anthony Towns. No, you may not need to, but I wouldn't be shocked if the organization were open to maximizing what they could get for him. I know for damn well that teams are going to be placing their bids for him. That's for sure. He is such an attractive offensive-minded center who's actually now begun playing better defense that I wouldn't be shocked at all to see the organization, after a change of ownership, moves off of him by basically saying we need a fresh start. We need to do everything right from scratch, and that means no lingering pieces. Or maybe they're satisfied with him, maybe they're satisfied with the front office, and then they just go, well, you know what, let's give this a shot because the front office is somewhat new. We'll see what ends up happening, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if new ownership means a complete overhaul from top to bottom, which may not be the worst thing in the world. Now, you want to give the current front office a chance to establish themselves, obviously, but at the end of the day, it's about relationships and it's about perception. And you know what? New ownership will create new relationship and new perceptions. That's just the reality of this situation. So I guess we'll see. But as of right now, it appears that the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Minnesota Lynx are going to be getting new owners. That's it for the Monday news dump. If you have questions for me, I'm doing a Q&A, I think next week or so send in your questions in the comments below. I'll collect them all. You can also hit me up at Twitter, and I'll just get every single question in a document, and I'll make sure to get them in a video. Yeah, like I said, maybe next week or so. So get those questions in. I'll be looking forward to them. Have a good week, guys.